Hello and welcome dear learners to the NPTEL course on Healthcare Quality Management, Infection Control and Patient Safety. In the Module 5, Operational Excellence in Healthcare, and for the Chapter 50, Strategic Planning for Patient Safety Part 2, we will be discussing on patient movements and transfers, departments, intensive care units, surgical suites and the key takeaways from this chapter. In the previous chapter, we have seen the part of planning and now we are exploring the second part, which is more talking towards in the first section as patient movements and transfers. So what is a patient movement and transfer, and it is being seen so critical? It is being seen critical to patient safety and occupational safety concerns. When we try to see that the patients are transferred from one department to other department, or the patient seeks a movement, there are a lot of issues which are related to increasing the numbers of morbidity with respect to the bariatrics or critically ill patients, which have amplified very much a risk of, or you may see in geriatric patients as well. So manual handling without assistive devices exposes a caregiver to injury and compromise with the patient safety issues. So there are risks of manual patient handling. So the risks are like caregivers are exposed to a high risk of back and musculoskeletal injuries which may happen very often. You might have also heard about that if you are not assisted, it is a major problem that you may lead to lot of injuries. Awkward handling of patients can aggravate pain and cause further injury, which is very inevitable. Unsafe handling practices directly affect the quality of patient care and can also seen by the patients and patient relative as being a very bad culture dealt with relation to patients movement and transfer in the hospital. Assistive devices for patient safety transfers. There are many assistive devices which are used in patient handling, including manual or power assisted ceiling or wall mounted lift, portable lift and patient hoist, electrical height adjustable beds, and these devices reduce the physical strain and improve safety and also decrease the patient stay in the hospital. Clinical situations which require assistive devices. Assistive devices are usually essential during vertical transfer between bed, wheelchair and toilet, which are the necessities to be found for day to day in a patient's bed. Lateral transfers between bed and the trolley. Patient positioning such as Trendelenburg and side tilt during bathing, weighing and assisted ambulation. So assisted devices play a very important role and they try to deal with major critical situations, and this is a need that a hospital should have. Designs implications of patient handling equipment. So patient handling equipments have direct implications for a building design, because if you find that your equipments are well fit with respect to the design, it is very important that they can be adjusted and can be benefiting more to the patients. Equipment such as sit-to stand lifts and ceiling mounted hoists require structural planning, electromechanical provisions, adequate spatial clearances, and these all requirements must be planned at the design stage and cannot be done at a later, which may lead to a lot of issues and which may lead to patient safety concerns. Caregiver safety and NIOSH insights. What is this National Institute of Occupational Safety and Health uh, recommendations? This recommendation comes from this very prestigious institutions which is more working towards occupational safety and health, and which highlights a strong link between caregiver safety and a patient safety. One which is being provided by the healthcare provider and one which is received, actually seen as an healthcare receiver. So there is a relationship which is developed with respect to identify the risk that can include in this relationship is more related to the falls, being that a patient is dropped, or friction injuries the patient usually faced up, and burns and dislocation shoulders, which are one which cannot be really missed. If the hospital has to take and develop this relationship, you need to work on the guidelines which are stated by NIOSH. Engineering controls significantly reduces this risk, and if you work on developing this, you may even find that healthcare workers also faces an issue which also might be reduced actually with the help of this. Now we will take upon to the departmental wise care. So with respect to emergency care, what is the scope and intent? So emergency care planning must define whether the facility provides initial emergency care or definitive emergency care. So these are the two different things. So hospital cannot refuse emergency patient, and hospital is a place where emergencies come without any notification. Facilities not equipped for this advanced care must stabilize patients from onward referral. If there is a reason actually that you have to refer, you need to prepare that and you need to put up to the patients and patient relatives actually. With respect to the space and capacity, emergency care is often limited to observation beds because emergency can turn out to be which can be referred to an ICU or can be referred to the wards. Or sometimes you may find that there is a great casualty which may lead to even surgical interventions. So facilities must be capable of handling infectious diseases outbreak and natural or man-made disasters. They need to be prepared actually with respect to the resilience handling towards the disaster management. Emergency care need to be with adequate space and surge capacity are essential for patient safety and to ensure that your hospital follows the quality with respect to emergency care. Now, emergency care infection and safety planning. Why it is so important that emergency care need to work on infection control? So as I have emphasized in the previous slide that adequate space is required. Adequate space is required more for the triage and patient management, which is a very essential part when you differentiate a patient actually or you segregate actually according to the patient's condition. Decontamination room with showers, depressurization rooms for infection aerosols. So these are the one which requires more space, and this cannot be ignored actually into the emergent spaces actually which are found to be very congested. You may report whole lot of these issues which are faced more into public hospitals. Exhaust system must prevent exposure of staff and patient. So exhaust system need to be planned actually, and which needs to make a space actually when you find that your emergency department is one among the best actually. It is more because of the exhaust system which makes space for the staff actually to come across and to have a proper dealing with patient's disease condition. Dedicated pathways towards are necessary, and plumbing system must prevent contamination of sewage or effluent treatment system, because this is the department which faces lot of hurdles actually, which might be because of increase of disease condition of a patient, might be because there are more staffing actually which requires for the multiple involvement of patients intervention. Airborne infection, isolated rooms and hand wash stations are critical, which we have even discussed in the previous chapter. In relation to that, emergency department needs to work on with the planning prior actually to develop this department. What are the risks in patient transfer and how it is more related to the built up environment? When your patient transfers needs are often overlooked in the design phase, and they lead to lot of issues with respect to the transfer, with respect to surgery and with the emergency rooms. The designs of the patient rooms, surgery suites and emergency rooms. So structural inadequacy for ceiling lifts is very common to be seen as. Room layouts may restrict access to mechanical lift, and storage for transfer equipment is often insufficient. So transport risks include carpenting, faulty cartwheels and unsafe imaging table transfers. So you may come across lot of issues which are diverted actually and made actually a problem which may lead to a lot of risk. So to control this or to reduce the transfer risk, you need to work on some solutions. Permanent modification to the work environment reduces the risk, and which is to be found as very important way to deal with this problem. Key controls which includes improved room design, access to the room and layout of the room, ceiling mounted or mobile mechanical lifting devices, raised toilet seats and grab bars, which reduce major of the issues which are dealt with patient safety, and adjustable height beds and adaptive features which are more adding a benefit to the patients and also giving more successes in the outcome of your services. With respect to radiology department, which is one among the department which faces major issue for safety. So radiation safety is regulated to confine exposure to designated rooms. Waiting areas and ultrasound rooms should be located away from the X-ray installation to reduce the risk from the X-ray. The design component must minimize the accidental radiation exposure and which is according to the norm need to follow all the necessary safety requirements. With respect to radiology, infection and pressure risk, and how does it really affect the patient? So radiology department often receive patients with pulmonary conditions, and you may see it is one among the topmost leading infections which we face with respect to lungs, and that too for upper respiratory tract infections. So patient may be infectious and prone to coughing. So the design must address the negative pressure and airborne infection, which is more a contamination actually from one patient to other or from a patient to a healthcare worker. With respect to MRI safety considerations in the radiology department, the MRI suits pose risk if patients with pacemakers enter inadvertently. Access to the gauze field areas must be physically restricted and detector bars and alarm system should be installed. And as you have seen, a lot of cases where the patient faces issue with respect to MRI is more because the safety norms are not tackled properly. Helium quench pipes must discharge into unoccupied and safe areas, which should be ensured. Nuclear medicine and radiation shielding. Why nuclear medicine requires enhanced radiation shielding? It is one because it is enforced from the steel structures and lead lid doors, which needs to be come up with a protective way. I-131 treatment rooms requires RCC construction for prolonged patient stay, as many times the patient has to be there for hours and days. A medical physicist must determine shielding requirement based on the radiation energy, and you need to have a skilled and occupied staff actually which deals with the issues of nuclear medicine. Now, with respect to intensive care units and why the space requirements and designing play a major role in the safety. As you know, ICU bed space should be 18.58 square feet, that is 200 square feet for new facilities, and 13.94 square meters, that is 150 square feet for renovation projects. So this is one of basic requirements that an hospital should follow when they are designing or planning for the space requirement with respect to ICUs. Adequate space allows the use of ventilators, dialysis machines, and resuscitation equipments. And a poor layout increases the error risk, which may lead to a major concerns to the patient and the hospital. ICU design for safety and monitoring, which is more with respect to equipment arrangement, which should minimize the clutter. And you need to know that the healthcare staff or dedicated staff work basis ensure the continuous visual monitoring, which needs to identify for any event happening. The central monitoring stations are essential in large ICU, which becomes very difficult for the staff to monitor. So central monitoring plays a very assistive role for this. Natural light helps reduce the ICU psychosis, and patients who develop more mental health issues can be reduced if there is maximum use of natural light which is being instated over there. With respect to infection control and communication, what are the norms that we need to understand with respect to ICU? So hand wash station must be located near the patient bed, which is to ensure to reduce the HAIs. Code blue system enable rapid emergency response when you identify that the patient is in some trouble or in a problem to handle. The code blue should be insisted. Dedicated communication systems are preferred over external wireless nets, which is one to communicate it fast and to deal the patient emergencies. ICU should include airborne infection isolation room, which is very important for a particular set of patients and the infections which may deal with a lot of contamination. Protective isolation rooms are required for immunocompromised patients who deal with major trajectories and have a comorbidity with respect to their infections. Now, the department is neonatal intensive care unit, which is more or very inherently vulnerable because it is more dealing with the neonates. So while NICU planning, which is based more on the classification of the care levels, which is very important. For the level 3, NICU provides the highest level of care and which is the one among the delicate care that you need to understand when you are making a planning for an NICU. Radiant warmers are routinely used, they need to be checked, and natural light should be controlled to avoid direct exposure to the neonates, which is very important that it should be avoided. Entry control is essential to prevent infant abduction, which is a safety concerns that need to be controlled with monitoring, and at the facility level, if the planning is more made in such a way, it can be halted. With respect to surgical suit, what is the essentiality that we need to follow? Patient safety principles. It is said that surgical safety is critical to reduce infection control, and it is very important that when you work for a checklist, which is we have uttered actually in the previous chapters, that Dr. Atul Gavande's book actually, which has highlighted that the importance of surgical checklist is also very significant, coming with WHO surgical safety checklist, which is also one of significant improvement in your outcomes, which is dealing with importance and paying more emphasis on the patient safety. Where with respect to surgery checklist, which is one critical part actually to reduce the infection prior actually and in the process and in the outcome, which may result into a better patient health. NABH standards guide operating room design, which needs to be taken into consideration when you are working on the patient safety principle with respect to surgical suit. Surgical suit zoning and traffic control. Hospitals which are facing more surgeries actually, or they have number of OTs actually, they need to permit actually through this traffic. So they need to work on the zoning, which is unrestricted, semi-restricted and restricted areas, which plays a very important role actually to track the infection and to work on that, on to curb the infections over there. Airflow must move from clean to less clean areas, which is very important for cross infection, where airborne infections are one to be dealt with respect to surgery very importantly. HVAC system plays very important role over here, as it must be properly designed and maintained, which is one to reduce the major load with respect to infrastructure. Now, surgical suite infection prevention measure. When we know that already the designing part has taken care and now it is the process that is being continued, now you come up with the infection prevention measure. With respect to surgery, lot of things are dealt, and the movement of clean material should be restricted to the clean zones. So, cleaning materials and the traffic of the staff and supplies should be avoided. Unidirectional airflow over the operating table is very important to deal with the process and to account it that the process has completed properly. The plenum size must adequately cover the surgical field, and this is where when we can take upon the surgical suit into the infection prevention measures in a proper way. So what are the key takeaways from this particular chapter? The key takeaways is like patient safety depends on a thoughtful design, which is with the equipments and operational planning. So you need to understand design, equipment and planning come in hand, and these all, when worked properly, may deal with a proper patient safety issues. Patient safety movement and emergency care, imaging, ICU, NICU and surgical areas each carry unique risk. So patient safety from the patient movement actually to the care processes and even till the discharge deals with lot of issues which are more towards the designing part of that facility. Integrating the safety principles into infrastructure reduces the preventable harm. So if you have to work on the prevention part and which are connecting with the patient safety, you need to integrate the principles which are listed over here with relation to the infrastructure and working on the processes and making the processes more better. So engineering controls and monitoring system are identified as the critical enablers of patient safety. If you need to take ahead the engineering controls and monitoring system, you work on a project actually which deals with an issue which might be identified through all the departments that we have discussed over here. So with this we come and end to this particular chapter and take ahead these references to be worked out for the projects that I have suggested for. So thank you for the patience listening.